This conference will now be recorded.
Just as an introduction, in case anybody isn't familiar, I'm Melissa Angriola. George Lasoya here for the chair and vice chair. And we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 9:31. The first item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment. Anybody have public comment? Anyone on the virtual? No one's on virtual. No one's on virtual. Okay. So no public comment? No? Okay. So we will move on to agenda item number 3, staff update.
All right. So just as a reminder, for 23-24, we have our funding from TxDOT, the Rural Public Transportation Coordination Plan continuation funding, $40,000 for 9/1 of 23 to August 31st of this year. And that fund, of course, these stakeholder coordination meetings for RCTPAG, outreach and recruiting, coordination and implementation of our 5-year plan, which work with the HOB, doing stuff with the transportation summit, putting together and sending out the newsletters, pushing out the resources on social media, performance metrics collection, and so on. Additionally, our TVC grant application, and this is the Texas Veterans Commission. We submitted that in December for a Veterans Transportation Program. We're currently in the process of presenting on that grant program on 27th or 28th to the TVC. And then at the April meeting of that commission, they'll make their decisions on awards. So we'll see if we receive that funding, if we're able to get kind of a bus pass or some similar type of program up and running for veterans. CTRTAG's Title VI plan update has been completed and it's been sent to TxDOT for review, and that's some of the information I sent out to the board earlier, I think in January, for demographic information that was needed for that plan. April was designated as Distracted Driving Awareness Month by the National Safety Council, so something to maybe push out or take notice of. Onto the Public Transportation Division Director's report to the State PTAC Committee. So the last PTAC meeting was held on the 25th of January. The report basically covered 2 things, and that was that there's 2 sets of proposed changes to their administrative code. And those rule changes were out for public comment. The first one was over the state allocation formula, and this was changed to maintain per capita funding levels to transit districts. Then the other changes were for the FTA state safety oversight program changes. So there were changes at the federal level, and that induced changes at the state level in our administrative code. So that covered 4 areas basically, and that was rail agency safety committees, risk-based inspection authority and program, training requirements, and then the public transportation agency safety plan comments. Then there was some discussion after that on their semi-annual operators meeting, which they would be discussing the statewide transit multimodal plan. That's the next big plan the state's putting together, obviously for multimodal transportation. Lastly, I'll go over some federal and state updates as far as grants. So the RAISE grant, which is one of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act programs. I think I have it on the next slide now. So the RAISE grant, it's closing, only in 8 days. It's not enough time to apply for this round, but there's still 2 more fiscal years of funding. So you can apply spring of 25 and then spring of 26. And this is for really any road, rail, transit, port projects, highway, bridge, roads, but it includes public transportation as well, the eligible projects. For 24, there is $1.5 billion in funding, including about $100 million for planning and preparation. 15% of, no more than 15% of all funding for any given year can go to a single state. About 50% is limited to urban areas, and then the remaining obviously goes to rural areas. The good thing about this grant is that the match can be 0 as long as you're an area of persistent poverty or a historically disadvantaged community. Additionally, the FTA just opened their 5339C and B, which is a low or no emission grant, and the bus and bus facilities program. So there's a little over $1 billion for the low or no emission program. So this is for the purchase or lease of 0 emission and low emission transit buses. So acquisition, construction, leasing of supporting facilities. So yeah, and the bus and bus facility program is about $390 million. This is for like it sounds like, buses, bus facilities, all sorts of capital projects, replacing, rehabbing, purchasing or leasing buses. And if you're a recipient of either of those programs, up to 0.5% of your grant award can be used for workforce development activities, and another 0.5% for costs associated with training if you go to the National Transit Institute. Deadline for that is April 25th, so still far out, enough time to apply. The other one was the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, their Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Program, so TXVIMP, and that's just a grant, basically a tax rebate for any legal entity or government or even individuals who want to replace diesel fuel vehicles with all electric models. Deadline for that is actually years out. It ends August. The program ends August 31st of 2025. And then lastly, Texas House Bill 4885 was signed into law and effective as of September of last year. That's the Hydrogen Infrastructure Vehicle and Equipment Grant Program. So it's still kind of in the works before you can actually apply for any program, but it's going to fund the purchase, construction, installation of infrastructure and vehicles powered by hydrogen. And that's it, the staff update.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes from the November 16th, 2023 meeting. Dominic sent those out, so we'll see if everybody got a chance to review them. If anybody wants to make comments, additions, changes? No? Okay, so
I move to accept the minutes as is.
thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to item number 5, regarding approval of the changes to the bylaws.
All right. So hopefully everyone got a chance to kind of look over the bylaws, which had the track changes on, so you can see what changes were made. But basically, there were 5 changes made. All of them pretty much small and procedural. So in Article 6, it was amended to change the quorum requirements from 33% to 50% plus 1. Next was we inserted some wording again in Article 6, stating that if you're a virtual attendee, if you're a member of the advisory group, you have to have your camera on when you're online to count towards quorum. And then in Article 3, we just clarified kind of the requirement for why our 5-year plan, the RCTP, exists. And that had to do with the House bill that was made, and then there was a text planning committee that came as a result of that eventually required there being a RCTP made for every planning region. In Article 3, we also clarified the power to adopt bylaws and approve officers, which we were doing already, but it just actually wasn't stated in there before. And then lastly, just clarified that officers cannot attend meetings by video, and they do have to be in person. And that elections are held every November at the RTAG meeting. And those are all the changes.
Okay. So motion to approve the changes to the bylaws.
So moved. And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Moving on to item number 6, regarding presentation on the mobility wallet.
All right. Do we have Colin online?
Yes, it's online, and I am attempting to unmute these by phone.
Okay. As it says, so Colin is a transportation planner. He's with the city of Oakland, California. And they have this universal basic mobility pilot, which is called a mobility wallet. He'll be giving us a presentation on how that works, kind of what the impacts of that have been.
You asked him to unmute himself, please?
Well, you can send a message in there on the.
He's by phone, so I can't.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Actually, if you can just say it to the mic, he can't hear me from up here.
Oh, okay. Colin, if you're able to hear us, can you unmute? Can you hear us, Colin?
I don't think you can hear us.
Let me check my emails.
Perhaps we can go on to the next one and then come back to him.
Yeah,
And I'll be.
try emailing him. Then I think move on to the next agenda item, which may be the
Okay, so moving on to regarding coordination and implementation of the fiscal year 22-26 regional coordinated transportation plan.
All right. So get past this presentation here. Okay, so if you have the packet, you have the 5-year plan there. So everything we're going to be discussing here is implementing several of those strategies, usually just around improving service to the elderly, to students, to disabled, and microtransit kind of achieves a large amount of those strategies at the same time. But one of those strategies is also implementing the Transportation Summit, which of course we held last year in April. So we have in your packets as well, there's a copy of an updated Transportation Summit agenda. The idea is kind of to hold another one this year, maybe sometime in the summer, and that's because the microtransit zones will be implemented sometime in May. So we want to give it maybe a few months to kind of see how the implementation is working, what the effects are, if there's any new issues that arise out of that. So it's in your packet, it won't be in the PowerPoint because it can't fit, it would be too small. But basically, it's going to kind of start off the same way. Arrival, networking, then welcome, and going over the goals for the day. The facilitators will kind of explain what to expect as far as the activities, presentations, and stuff. Then again, there's a table activity at the very beginning where you have people from different organizations and entities and city governments and stuff around the region. They'll talk about any transportation opportunities that they think have been addressed since the last summit in 2023. So again, keeping in mind microtransit and how that's working for them. Maybe, there have been several needs, gaps that have been addressed. And then they'll also write 3 or 4 needs, opportunities, or gaps that are impacting groups or people that they serve. So after that, they're going to report out and we're going to write down on all their table cards, basically, what needs have been addressed, what needs haven't been addressed. After that, there will be a panel. It'll be different from last year because now it'll be going over kind of what's different from last summit. So what solutions have been tried, what new partnerships, what new projects, sort of to gauge, how much coordination has improved since the last summit. And then, discussing what solutions, if any, what resources were used, how to use public input, and so on. After that, another debrief, everybody discussing in groups what they gleaned from that panel, what information, partners, resources that they think would be useful. Then after that, there's the speed solutioning activity, which we had last time. And that's where we go over the opportunities people brainstorm at the beginning, then breaking up into groups again, going over using the sticky notes for each of those gaps or needs, putting down who they think could be a potential partner, what organization, and then what they think might be a potential solution for addressing that need. Then after that, there's a debrief for the speed solution, some more discussion on it. At lunch, we would have a speaker from the HOPS, Daryl or Raven. And then that's where we discuss future plans after microtransit, maybe what issues have come up. Then at the very end, we're going to do what next planning. So this is where we set up concrete steps for developing partnerships, improving coordination, and then addressing new issues that have come up or old ones that weren't addressed. So with all that said, that it's planned right now to end at about 3:10. But that's including, we have about an hour gap in there. We got rid of one of the activities last time was where you go around and discuss or we had the different tables and there was people from like the HOP and from SICOG and KTEMPO discussing their needs for public input or public outreach. And then the attendees would tell them how they can improve their public outreach. We got a lot of great input and feedback from that. I felt it may be repetitive to kind of do that again. I don't know what the RTAG thinks, if maybe we want to keep that in there or do a different activity, but that's open to any input from you guys as far as what the change or keep the same for that, for the summit. So any input?
I thought it was facilitated very well last time, and I think it flowed quickly. It generated a lot of discussion, and I really liked how it flowed. Yeah, I wouldn't mind keeping it the way it was, but again, I'm open to any changes anyone else suggests.
And for us, I don't know how to address, because I know a lot of it was just looking at gap analysis and partnership building and stuff, but some of our realities that we're seeing from an impact of just trying to maintain our transportation initiatives for their age on aging. We've lost providers that for not being able to find drivers, the cost for gasoline, the infrastructure for itself. I mean, it's just like everything else. If, we don't have the workforce of infrastructure to implement some of the transportation initiatives. So our concern is kind of changing. Is like, if I have money, but I can't find viable providers, I'm at a disadvantage, and even, if I were to get, if CTRTAG were to get the $300,000, how do we look at making sure that we can spend that money? Those are concerns that I think it's kind of related to the issues I have with having people take care of individuals in their home. We can't find workers to take care of them because the cost reimbursement is not there. So this is also translating to some degree in transportation. Am I missing something, or is that a trend? I know, our health plans are contracting, with their value-added services, and is transportation costs really hurting your bottom line of trying to get people to medical help?
I would say it's not hurting the bottom line. It's, part of, it's not used as much as it should be, honestly. Our challenge is people being aware of the options. And so we do education for it, but it's, I think it's messaging still that is a challenge for us.
Right. And even if, like, being part of the Medicaid plans, I don't know what we're hearing a lot of vendors are not even wanting to work with Medicaid anymore because it's not fiscally viable to be a Medicaid provider for Medtrans. And so at the end of the day, we can say we provide transportation, but we really don't if we don't have the providers. And so I just want that as, I don't know if that's a proper focus for the group.
Last time, I know there was a lot of discussion around volunteer programs. I think that's two of the people on the panel kind of discussed their quasi-volunteer programs and stuff. And there were suggestions for things like men with trucks. I forgot who suggested that, but it's like retired people, with trucks who would provide volunteer transportation service and stuff like that. And that's kind of how that was addressed there. But again, we haven't really, there's been no volunteer services kind of. Nobody's gotten together and kind of figured out how to, I guess, have the service infrastructure to put that together, how to recruit volunteers or who's going to run that and stuff.
I mean, is that a concern from anyone else's perspective in the room as far as, Daryl, I don't know how are you seeing issues with providers and?
There's a shift going on. Medicaid, the insurance companies play a role in all of that. We just had a shift from one of our brokers. They lost I don't know which insurance company it was, but they lost an insurance company. So those rides are not coming to us. I think that translated into, about $100,000 hit on just that one insurance company shifting brokers. Now that's happened before, and they often cycle back in through another company. We're a provider, so whatever broker it goes to, they often come back to it. So, but it's not it's not a smooth flow all the time. There's ups and downs to that whole program. And the reason I mention the money is because that's contract money to us, and we take every penny of that contract money, throw it over the invisible fence into the public transit area. So Medicaid actually, I think the last time I looked at that number, it was providing about 28% of our operating funds. So it's a big deal to us, and we monitor it very carefully. When we go into micro transit, it will change a little bit for us because it will be commingled into the micro transit services as well, just specific vehicles, obviously. But so it's a moving target. It's always a moving target. Has been since 2014 when Health and Human Services went to that broker system. So
I mean, when we first did our transportation summit in, was it 19?
Oh, the original, yeah.
The original one,
original one.
to where we're at now, and we're going into the microtransit, that addresses a lot of the needs that we as users that have individuals impacted with disabilities is going to remove that barrier. My concern now that this will happen is having enough, of providers to meet the needs. The demand's going to be greater on the disability side of it.
Right.
Access to going to a person's home. It's going to be, they don't have to wait to go to the bus stop and things like that. I was just leery about that potential aspect. And I know it's hitting me now, so, I think we should be aware of it, planning.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating on our side because of the rule, the change in 14 that sent all of that Medicaid work through brokers. Used to, we contracted directly with Health and Human Services, and they would just directly download all of those trips into our system. Now we have to go through a broker, and we don't have control over any of that. They send trips. We're contracted with 3 brokers, and they send trips. Sometimes they don't send trips. It is just a moving target. Be perfectly honest with you, the system worked better pre-14 than it does now. I don't know.
With the things we deal with Medicaid, with the change, it worked much better before than now.
And that is a legislative issue. I mean, it's way above all of our pay grade. Truthfully, this is something that has to be addressed in the legislature.
Well, that was kind of my only comment of I think that's the next trend of issues that we'll be seeing evolving. Because I really feel that microtransit has met a lot of those things that we addressed early on.
Okay. As far as when we host the summit, I was thinking maybe July to give it 2 or so months from the time the zones are implemented. Does that sound like a good date for everyone? We'll figure out whatever specific day as far as the month. Okay. And let me see if there's anything else on our side. But as far as, and I mean for COG staff coordination for the RCTP, the newsletters, we're doing our quarterly survey out to transportation stakeholders. I think we can move on to your part of the RCTP implementation. So we have the 4 bullet points. And you can go over whatever kind of.
Has the guy from the mobility wallet, did he show up?
Yes.
Do you want to do that first?
Oh.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome. So sorry about the technical difficulties.
There we go. All right, Colin, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
Great. Yeah, apologies again. We use Teams and Zoom, and our computers don't play nicely with outside software, unfortunately. So my name's Colin. I'm with the City of Oakland Department of Transportation. in the planning and project development team. So my team works mainly on outreach for longer term transportation projects and programs. Next slide, please. So just to make sure y'all know my role in this, I was not I did not work on this pilot in East Oakland. I'm currently working to support outreach for the pilot in West Oakland. So I might not be able to speak to the more detailed questions you might have, but I can definitely take questions back and for what you might be interested in. So for today, I'll give you an overview of the East Oakland pilot, the methods we used, how we evaluated it, and some takeaways. Next slide, please. So this is the project area or program area. There's several definitions of East Oakland, but we want to be expansive to make sure we got a lot of participants. The goal of the program was to build off of a recent bus rapid transit project that was built on International Boulevard and encourage ridership to that new bus line, which has been very successful. The Alameda County Transportation Commission gave us a $243,000 grant, and we used that to pass out prepaid debit cards to residents throughout the area. Went from fall of 2020 to December 2021. And next slide. So we use prepaid debit cards to distribute these funds. We had enough funding for 500 participants. The way we did our data collection was that we used an intake survey that established participant eligibility for the program. And once they secured that, they would receive the first disbursement of $150. And then we distributed a second mid-program survey with the same questions about travel behavior, in which they received the second disbursement of $150. So with these, you could spend the funds on anything related to transportation. There's merchant ID code restrictions, so you can't spend the funds at, like a grocery store, other places. The card will recognize and decline the transaction. But the world of transportation is expansive. People could spend those funds at a bike shop on bike repair or on bike equipment or any other type of store related to mobility. And they could ride the ferry, take scooter shares, Amtrak, and BART. Next slide. So we did a lot of marketing and advertising for this program. We mailed out 12,000 flyers to the project area, used postcards. We worked with CBO, stands for Community-Based Organization. So we partnered with a lot of local organizations who have different channels and ears with the community. We canvassed at transit stations, the new Tempo BRT line, and at libraries and community events. Oh, and also, the 2 community bike rides are great. We have a local organization called Cycles of Change that does bicycle education events at schools and is really a great partner for our programs. And next slide. So this is just basic info on how we evaluated the program. We, like I mentioned earlier, we had our initial survey that gave us information on travel patterns and behavior, demographic data, and people's qualification, their income for the program. UC Davis also did some additional research in collaboration with Spin Scooter Share. And we're exploring our long-term funding options. We're eventually looking to make this a citywide program rather than a area-wide, and are working with our funding partners on that. Next slide. So the majority of participants were Hispanic or Latino or Black and African American, and about 3/4 of them earned 40K or less a year. So these people really rely on public transportation and as their main source of mobility. Next slide. So the people's main modes out of economic necessity are riding the bus and taking BART. And half of participants said that they could not take their preferred mode of transportation, which I think is driving. Next slide. So we had great results from the program. 40% of the participants changed the way they travel, and 23% drove less since receiving the card. So we did see some positive results in terms of mode shift. And next slide. So participants rode transit and drove less as their primary mode of transportation for commute and other trips. And you can see on the chart on the right that there's a 6% decrease in driving. So although that may seem small, it's compared to driving's overall share in people's mode choice. That's a significant impact within our pool of participants. So it's helping us achieve our citywide goals and helping people economically with the program to afford their transportation costs. Next slide. So people, vast majority of people chose to buy a Clipper card or BART cards. We have now transitioned to only Clipper cards, so that's what people purchase. And with a Clipper card, it's expensive to other modes. You can use it across platforms with AC Transit and the ferry, other modes. About 9% people have used it on AC Transit specifically, and then lower shares for the other modes, the non-auto modes. And next slide, please. So some key takeaways. Prioritize equitable selection alongside mode shift goals. So and this has come up for our West Oakland pilot. It's really important to try to target low-income communities who really rely on public transportation and to not only ease their economic burden, but to help them and other people take more sustainable modes of transportation. Number 2 is to work through existing community channels. Having community-based organizations that you have a good relationship with helps a lot to reach different community members. You might have folks at a church or certain community events at a library. Libraries in Oakland provide a lot of services and different kinds of meeting groups. There's like a fathers group, and another library has a bike repair station and programs. So there's some good opportunities to plug in with those folks. Next slide. So, this was the third takeaway is if you're using like an iPad or some kind of screen to help someone take an intake survey, be sure to help them. If they might have any vision or dexterity challenges, maybe for senior citizens, and also be prepared to have language assistance. We've done outreach in different parts of the city and had larger Chinese speaking populations than expected. So it's been helpful to partner with. We have a group called St. Mary's organization, which provides homeless services. Had Chinese speaking Chinese-speaking people on staff, and they're a great help to us. And then we've made sure to make all of our materials accessible in Spanish and Chinese. So the last challenge we had was related to people registering cards. We had an administrative kerfuffle, I guess, with uh, we weren't able to collect personal data besides certain types of contact information. So what ended up happening, kind of an unknown at that point, was that when people ordered physical prepaid debit cards, they were sent out in the mail, but they didn't include the person's name on it, just their address. So I think a lot of people thought this was junk mail or didn't know what it was and just threw it out. So that posed many challenges in getting people to sign up. So we had a lot of follow-up and customer service needed after that. So we've tried to remedy that with our pilot in West Oakland, still facing challenges related to our privacy ordinance and other finance regulations. So those are challenges abound administratively when it comes to implementing these programs. And next slide, please. So the pilot has been successful in East Oakland. We got over 1,000 survey responses. We contacted 30 community orgs and had successful outreach coordination with them. We provided one of the first prepaid transportation card programs in the city, and established new processes for ourselves. And we've also been able to partner with UC Davis and others to get more interest in the project and do additional analyses on the impacts on mode shift for these prepaid card programs. And then on the right there, you see some media attention from City Lab. And next slide. So that concludes the presentation. Again, I might not be able to speak to the more nitty-gritty details of the program setup, but I'm happy to take any questions.
I had a question. So this was a pilot that ran from 2020 to December of 21. I mean, are there plans to have it be in place as a permanent program? And if so, is there sustainable funding for that?
We do have a long-term goal to make this a citywide program, and then to also have that be coordinated with TDM funding for when like a development project comes in and they need to do TDM mitigation, then they would be able to tap into that fund to help their project be cleared. But we have to work with, I think, our county, Alameda County Transportation Commission to look into that. We're going to implement the West Oakland pilot, and then if that's successful, then we'll have more leverage to advocate for an ongoing program.
So the West Oakland pilot is going on right now?
We've been setting it up, and we're hoping to get it rolling within the next month or so.
I'm curious if you have looked at your ridership levels post-project to see if those levels have fallen back to pre-project levels, or have you seen any steady increases or any changes since the project has ended?
That's a good question. This was also happening at the same time as COVID, so it's kind of difficult to parse that out from the data. And it's a relatively small group within the Oakland area, about 500 participants. So I think if we were more savvy and had, we're able to track folks and individually, with like a travel diary or something like that, we might be able to have a better answer. But yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other questions for you, Colin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Move back to 7. Okay, so we're going to move back to agenda item 7 for the coordinated transportation.
All right. So, yeah, you're right with Daryl to kind of give us updates on the implementation of the RCTPs, like the pilot, microtransit zone,
Yeah.
whatever order you want to go in.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot going on, and it really is pretty exciting. A 30,000-foot view of our approach to this is I call it the pilot to the pilot, and then the pilot, and then we will go region citywide, and then phase 4 would be regional throughout all 9 counties. So the pilot to the pilot of microtransit started this past couple weeks ago on February 5th. And I just called the office a little while ago and asked them what the numbers were as of yesterday. So this is the pilot of the pilot is at Fort Cavazos with 4 vehicles. 2 of the vehicles is circulating in one zone. Those are microtransit vehicles circulating in one zone. And then the other 2 vehicles are circulating on what we call the circulator, which is the main cantonment area of the base, you know, the PX, and all the restaurants, and many of the facilities, the hospital, et cetera, that is on the base. Zone 1, for those of you who are familiar with the base, is the single soldier barracks up north, immediately north of that. So there virtually was no advertising. This is the pilot of the pilot, and we just wanted to kick it off. Really, the month of February is for us to work the kinks out of the system. But anyway, we started out day 1, which was February 5th. We had 7 riders, virtually nothing, because nobody knew about it. As of yesterday, we had a total of 562. So 132 of those were on the circulator, on the main cantonment area, and then 430 of them were from zone 1. So 562 in 10 days' time, that's a pretty steep climb. And that fits the model that we had researched and found virtually in every operating, from every operator that started a microtransit system that we researched. That's the kind of start they had. It's very intuitive. It utilizes a software app to order your vehicle to come pick you up. The software itself, we contracted with them in January, early January, and they've done a great job. The company is called Spare Labs. They're out of Vancouver, Canada. The software itself is very dynamic. It's real time. It's basically in the simplest terms, it's a scheduling and dispatch software. So if any of us pick up our phone, download the app, order a vehicle to come pick us up, it's a curb-to-curb service. So it works you've heard me say before, very similar to Uber or Lyft, that type of service, except it's a shared ride service. So rather than you riding in the vehicle by yourself, as that vehicle is taking you from point A to point B, it may divert a block or so and pick somebody else up, and then divert and pick a third person up. It'll drop you off eventually there. The ridership, the wait times are like around 15 minutes, if that, and the complete time on the vehicles is about 15 minutes. So the total time involved for these people is about 30 minutes to get from ordering the ride to being dropped off, which is an awesome frequency. the whole concept of by means of reminder, first of all, I like this format a whole lot better than Zoom. I know I've mentioned this before, but in Zoom meetings, it's hard to get the concept. There's three pillars in transit. One is the frequency. How often does the vehicle come around, giving you an opportunity to get on? The other one is the hours of operation, and the third one is the area of operations. And they're all three expensive to increase. Those are three big areas that we've wanted to increase in this region for a long time. But which comes first? It's all kind of a chicken or the egg kind of thing, and you have to spend your money wisely. There's really been no other methodology that I'm aware of that would allow you to increase all three of those things, decrease in the case of frequency, you want it to come around more frequent, and then increase your hours and increase your footprint, all because of the same thing. And this microtransit system does do all three of those. So anyway, good numbers on that. So that's the pilot to the pilot. In March, we will start the actual pilot, which is we're just now starting to advertise for the service. And right now, the software seems to be working great. We really have not had any major hiccups at all in the software. It seems to work as advertised. The concept of this is we program rules into the software. And I used the word dynamic a minute ago. So the software knows how many people are on any of the vehicles at any given time. And the software will, if there's a big influx of people logging on through their app and they need more vehicles over in a certain area, the software will automatically divert a vehicle over into that area. So anyway, when we transition from February into March on base, we will put 16 vehicles on base at once instead of 4. So, but we didn't want to put all 16 out there until we knew the software was going to be working properly, and it is. So starting at the beginning of March, we will have 16 vehicles out there. We have received those vehicles. They came in last week. They are Dodge ProMasters, Ram ProMasters, 2500s. They're the full height. I'm 6 foot, and I stood in it yesterday, and it's about 4 to 5 inches over my head. So you can fully stand up in them. They're quite nice, actually. They're having logos put on all of them right now. So the 4 that we're running during the month of February is just 4 of our existing vehicles that we're running on base. So in March, I forget what the date is, right at the beginning of March, there's a ribbon cutting ceremony that's planned. It will have a lot of big hitters there from the state level, and we're inviting all the local folks. You guys are all invited. We'll send out an actual electronic invite to everyone. But it's we're not sure exactly how that's going to go, but we'll have all 16 vehicles there. The commanding general of the base, the governor is thinking about being there. So it's going to be a fairly big event. And I didn't know this. I found out yesterday that we won an award already from TTA, Texas Transit Association, for innovation for this type of service, microtransit service, bringing it to the base. It's the first time it's ever been implemented on a military base. So the Pentagon is watching it very carefully, to make sure that it goes well. And if it does go well, they're very interested in doing something similar in 77 installations around the world. So that's a pretty big microscope to be under. But, so the microtransit zone on Fort Cavazos, that's that. We will kick off. So then we transition from the pilot to the pilot. We transition from the pilot, then we go into the urban area where we will be implementing the same service throughout all 5 cities. We've got a number of zones set up. We're buying another 25 microtransit vehicles to augment our existing fleet. We are going to do an auction. I've told you guys before that we haven't had an auction since before COVID. We did that on purpose in order to keep the vehicle so that we could do part swaps as we needed with some of our older vehicles to keep them running. So we're going to auction all of our, or most of our old ones away. We're going to bring in 25 more microtransit vehicles for the city areas. So that in the urban system, what you will see is, like Temple, for example, will have 4 zones in it. And I think there's 12 vehicles in Temple running around at all times. It'll be running, instead of running 12 hours a day, we'll be running 14 hours a day, and we'll be running on over a larger geographic area as well. Same exact concept. You can order a vehicle off of the app. It'll come pick you up, take you curb to curb, where origin to destination is another way of saying it. For those people who don't have access to a smartphone or to the app overall, they can also book a ride through our website, or they can also just call our customer service number and book it verbally over the phone as well. So those pieces are in place and are also being implemented on base. So that part is working as well. The second bullet, procure the vendor for the trip planning app, that is Spare Labs, and they are on board. It's going very well, as I mentioned. The software, I can't emphasize this enough, the software is the cornerstone to this type of technology or this type of service. Without this, and we didn't have this technology until Spare was one of the first ones to actually bring it online. And they brought it online in 2019, right before COVID. So, and I was just at the SWATA conference, the Southwest Transit Association in Tulsa last week. The microtransit topic was a big topic. It's clearly catching on in the 8 states that make up SWATA, and I also know that it's catching on really nationwide. So I think you're going to see this because of this, the technology of the dynamic software. What we couldn't do it. We could not do what this software does. I've got a scheduling department and a dispatch department. Physically, we would not be able to keep up with this type of change. I mean, it can adjust literally within seconds based on the input of people logging on and scheduling their trips, et cetera. So it's all lifetime. On the app, you'll be able to see when your vehicle is going to get there. You'll be able to see the map and see the bus moving closer to you. So there's a lot of dynamic feedback to the passenger, so that I think the ride quality overall, the experience is going to be a lot better overall, not to mention the shorter frequencies. You know, another piece that will start in May when we started in the region, or I'm sorry, in urban. I've mentioned before that we're going to totally stop all fixed route service when we go into this. We are going to have at least a couple weeks and probably a month overlap between fixed route and microtransit, but eventually it will be microtransit by itself. So what we will do with our larger fixed route buses at that point, many of them need to be auctioned off, and we will do that. The others are going to be put on a connector route, which will run, it's a 36-mile run from Cove all the way into downtown Temple. We're doing a similar route right now, but it has a 2-hour headway. A 2-hour, you only get an opportunity to get on. It only comes by, a bus comes by in front of you if you're trying to get on it once every 2 hours. So one of the things we will do in May is we will utilize our fixed route buses. We'll probably put at least 4 and probably 6 buses running on the connector route. So you'll see that headway go from 2 hours to about 30 minutes. So you'll be able to jump on a bus at any point, every 30 minutes one will come by, you'll have an opportunity to get on, and then transit east or west, whichever way you're going. We will have mobility hubs, one in each of the 5 cities. That's where people, if they're going to a certain city, they will be dropped off in that area, at which point they can, when they order their rides, a transit vehicle, micro transit vehicle, will pick them up and take them where they need to go within that city. Does that make sense? So you've got zones in each city, you've got multiple vehicles in each zone. All of those vehicles are feeding the connector route if you're going long distance somewhere within that 36 miles. If you're going just within a zone, the microtransit vehicle will just take you from A to B within the zone, or it will take you to an adjacent zone as well. So it's a pretty dynamic system and seems to be working quite well. You've got a bullet up there. These next two are really more futuristic. You won't see these until next year, but I think, Dominic, you probably put them on there just as something the other things that we're planning to come forward. The park and rides, at each one of those mobility hubs, we're going to pursue a park and ride so that we can also accommodate commuters easier. People right now, if you don't, you can use microtransit to be picked up at your house, but a lot of people don't want to be picked up at their house. They don't mind riding and jumping on the connector, but they need a place to park. So we will lease or buy land. It could be as simple as us just leasing a corner of a parking lot near a mobility hub with, 40 spaces or something like that, and they'll be reserved for commuters. Or maybe we will purchase some land and build those as well. Anyway, some park and rides, those are coming. I think we're going to be pursuing those pretty heavily in 2025. And then that last bullet, that's a very, very interesting one. You just mentioned the NOLO grant coming out and the bus and bus facility money that's available there. This is a controversial topic, but I'm just going to give you my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that this region is really not ready for fully electric vehicles. And the reason is we don't have the infrastructure to charge fully electric vehicles. But hydrogen is another way we can go, which also qualifies for the NOLO. NOLO, by the way, is no emissions or low emissions. I think we most know that. Hydrogen is another route that we can go. We are researching, and here's a study that was done very successfully of transitioning to converting your fleet to hydrogen. And when I say the fleet, in this case, I'm talking about the larger vehicles. So what we would be using in the connector route up and down that 36-mile area. The vehicles that we will be using at first will be our existing vehicles. But all of those vehicles are getting old and they do need to be replaced. So we are looking into the possibility of going with a hydrogen option. For one thing, the money is there through the NOLO grant. And secondly, it is a more cost-effective way of proceeding. We would need to construct a hydrogen plant on our facility. That's another part of the plan that we would be looking at. We've got a 15-acre property, and we still have 5 acres that are not being used. So we would look into building a small hydrogen plant where we could fuel those vehicles. And we called it a corridor because if we do that, we would also make that available to the public. So there are a lot of businesses that run hydrogen vehicles, and we would make that as more or less as a hydrogen gas station, if you would. And that can become another revenue stream for us as well, selling hydrogen to the public. And that corridor, we would do that right on our facility, if you know where it is, in Belton, right off of I-14 there. So the hydrogen corridor that we're referring to is I-14. So that's just a peek under the tent of a couple of other ideas that we're pursuing going forward in the future, all of which would benefit regional transportation all the way around. But we're really excited about this microtransit system. everything we're seeing is it's successful. It will be successful. The people really like it. We're excited. So I think it's going to solve a lot of our issues that we have in the RCTP as well. Questions? Anybody?
Will special transit be lumped into the microtransit process?
Good, thank you. There's so much to this new service, it's hard to remember all these nuances, but everything that we are doing right now will be, we use the term commingled. It will be all commingled into the microtransit service. So yes, so what we're doing right now is fixed route service, ADA service, non-emergency medical, which is Medicaid stuff. All of those services and any other on-demand service that we come up with, some specialty programs like the Clean Seniors and some of those other specialty programs we have, it will all be commingled into microtransit, which is one of the beauties of that system. I mentioned that we are we're stopping fixed route when this was the thing I referred to as, should we jump into the deep end of the pool or wade slowly into the shallow end? And we're coming pretty close to jumping into the deep end. But another nice thing about this software is it feeds us so many analytics that we can track. You know, I mentioned the timing, the ridership per hour, the wait times, the transit times. All of that information will be able to be fed to us, but it's also all GPS co-located. So we can see where people are getting on, where people are getting off. We will be able to, just by literally sliding a dial on the screen, be able to see the influx in the morning and the peak times and the off-peak times. Like for example, one of the things we're seeing out of Fort Hood, they actually have 4 different peak times at Fort Hood. So, you know, it will allow us to influx more vehicles on during the peak times and pull vehicles off for maintenance and cleaning and things of that nature during the lower times. So as we gather a few months worth of that kind of information, we will try to reinstate some of the fixed routes, primarily in Temple and Killeen. We have 10 fixed routes right now. I don't see us ever putting 10 fixed routes back in again because I think this microtransit will just overtake fixed route. But there are some areas that a fixed route really does make sense. But right now, over time, our fixed routes have been changed so much. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti. We need to straighten them out. I'm just thinking out loud for Temple. We won't do this unless the analytics dictate that it should be done this way. But we'll probably have one running north-south and one running east-west in Temple. We'll probably do something similar in Killeen. So that's 4 fixed routes I think that we will probably put back in once we know exactly where to put them. You'll see some go in, they'll be longer, some will be shorter, some will get shifted to the east or the west, some will get shifted north or south. So they'll be fine-tuned into the areas where we really need it, where the people really need them to be. And so then the microtransit service, like it feeds the long 36-mile connector route, it will also feed any new fixed routes that we put back in. So it becomes a fluid system of transportation all the way around, commingled with all of the existing services. Does that make sense?
So Daryl,
I had a question. We have Temple, we have four regions.
Right.
Out service areas. Belton and Temple kiss on each other.
Yeah, they do.
Is there going to be some way, for example, the west part Temple people can get into the Belton?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, because I know a lot of people that live in the area that I live in go to the doctors in Belton.
Right.
They shop in Belton.
Right.
And so forth. And if they're going to have to go someplace and then, how are we going to get that done?
Right. We're shifting a focus really to the UZAs. So Temple and Belton is a small UZA. It's a small urban UZA. I'm getting into some FDA terminology here, but it's important because it dictates the funding, what pot of money what pot the money comes out of to us. And then you've got Parker Heights, Killeen, and Cove, which is a large urban UZA. That money comes out of a different pot, but each pot, you don't get anything from the feds without strings attached. Each pot of money has strings attached to that money with certain rules that we have to follow. And when we use the term fixed route service, there's a lot that comes with that. We're mandated by law to provide ADA service 3/4 of a mile on both sides of the fixed route. Microtransit, we are going to commingle ADA into the microtransit service, but we don't have to because it's not called a fixed route. It's really odd. It's a lot of bureaucracy dealing with the feds. But anyway, we're going to be able to do, the short answer is yes, we're going to be able to do a lot of things under a microtransit system just by definitions that we're not allowed to do under a fixed route system by definition. So we have a lot more latitude. We're losing some of those federal handcuffs on some of the services we provide by going this route without getting full details, which is very, very much in the weeds. So, does that answer that, Tom?
So Daryl, one of the things we mentioned at our last meeting was the education piece for our community and the use of bus and stuff. At what point in March, or is it going to be April? I know April's going to be a crazy month.
Yeah, we actually started. Jason, when did we meet with Temple? Was that week before last? I think
Week before last, and that was a continuation because we met back in November.
That's true.
To start that conversation.
The answer is that we did already start those conversations with the UZAs, each UZA, and we're getting ready to have another meeting with Killeen. The purpose of those meetings, I just call them city input. We're wanting input from the cities. And in fact, 2 weeks ago when we met with Temple, out of that Zoom meeting we had, Jason, I think there was 2 little islands that came up that you guys were interested in. Those are now integrated into the mapping software as we use the term satellites. So they're 2 little satellites. We won't necessarily be providing service between those, the city and the satellite, but we will be able to, we won't pick people up in between, but we will make a run from the city to the satellites.
Right. And when you talked earlier about some of these microtransits showing the heat map, showing where the need is.
Yes.
That was us anticipating based on, we know that area.
Yeah.
We know there's going to be a need in that area. It may not make sense, at least in the initial round, to do the microtransit service for that whole area. But we know that one particular senior living area, and that the need and the demand is going to be there, and we want to make sure that those riders are served.
Right.
And that was something that, it was a great learning point for us as the city, for how we think about this, because our understanding was that those microtransit service areas, it would be just one contiguous area. So I know that we can pull out and create those little satellite islands was, I would say, a game changer.
Yeah.
It really always then grow into that later.
Right. So the input is coming from 2 different angles. One is directly from our stakeholders, the cities. And the other will be public hearings from the public. Those start March 11th.
Okay.
And so the week of March 11th, we're going to, they're not scheduled yet, but we're hoping to schedule one every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and cover all 5 cities.
So Daryl, I mean, from a different perspective, because we represent the disability population, which has a different kind of need.
Yeah.
And it may require us to help them with how do you transition from your current apps to this other app, or what those processes are. Some of them need a little bit more assistance on that.
Yeah.
And I think us as community partners would be looking at a different type of training, or help me out.
Yeah, I think the idea last
Rather
time
training.
that we mentioned was doing a class where we have like,
Yeah.
service providers and like the senior centers, representatives from them, and treating them on how to teach the people they serve, like
Right.
how to access the app and how to revise and basically how it all works.
Right. There, I did take that information back to James, our James.
Yeah.
And he already has on his radar special training for disabled. We also are talking right now to Spare. They're putting together a training video, and there's a section of that training video that will also address handicapped as well. So
Yeah, as simple as like downloading the app, registering for
Yes.
the app, even those simple things.
it goes into detail on, you go to the Apple App Store.
Okay.
Here's the address, and this is how you download it, and then.
And how's the video being distributed?
It'll be available on our website. Now, this is all leading up to May. It's not there right now, but it will be available on our website, and we can send it out. And then we will also have James and a couple of others coming out. We can set up some special travel training events. We could use this room, for example. And then in addition to that, we can make arrangements for buses to go pick those folks up, especially the public hearings. We want to get as many people at these public hearings as possible. So I've already talked to operations about scheduling some vehicles specifically to make runs for handicapped individuals, to take them to the public hearings.
So my recommendation is, because we're seeing an uptick in utilization of this building or other buildings and stuff, that we start booking dates in anticipation of this,
Okay.
because I think that's going to be, I've never seen so much activity here in this building in the last couple of months, and it just seems to be more and more. And so, we're not doing the virtuals anymore. We're doing, in person. So my recommendation also for planning, all of us that have committees and stuff can incorporate some of those discussions that we're having within our own systems to bring in a speaker to talk to, our committees or subcommittees that we're working with, to at least get that word out so that we can be a partner with you.
Right.
So.
A comment and a question. First, thanks for all your work on this. I know it's going to, been an issue for this community for a very long time. I'm really excited about this coming. I do want to request that if you haven't already, I want to make sure that Baylor Scott and White is included
Yes.
as in getting that messaging because of the scope of the facilities where we have across this area. I want to make sure the right people are given the information ahead of time to communicate it to patients. Then putting flyers in clinics, in the hospital, because we've got so many of our patients using transportation, public transportation to get to their doctor's appointments. So want to make sure we go through the right channels to get that out ahead of time. On the same side with the health plan too, not just Baylor Scott and White, but the rest of our provider network in this community. We can use that avenue to help get the word out about that to patients seeing other providers too. So and I'm happy to help facilitate that if needed.
Okay,
Let me know. And then just a question, this may have been addressed in the past and I just haven't missed it, but payment for this, is that done through Spare Lab as well?
It is. Yeah, you can do it through the app. We actually still have those tokens, those tokens that say to hop on them and I think 50 cents or something like that. We debated doing away with that, but then we decided, no, let's just keep that going. It doesn't hurt anything. We'll just keep that process going. We also have monthly passes, and we also will keep the weekly, well, not weekly, that you can use them anytime, but the punch card system. So all of those things will just stay in place. Plus, you'll be able to just pay through the app as well. Another piece I forgot, and there's so many little pieces to this, but it's kind of a neat one. Economically, it doesn't always make sense. If we extend our hours, just 2 hours, we're going from 12 to 14 hours. Well, it may or may not make sense for us to have our entire fleet out during those 2 extra hours. Or we anticipate in the future that that will expand out even more. We'll probably go to 16 hours later in the future. But it doesn't mean we would have all of our fleet out. So I refer to these hours, the timeframes that people want to have access to transportation, but it doesn't make sense for us to have our entire fleet out. I call those gap hours. It just doesn't make sense for us to do that. And for connectivity reasons, we need to have, if we're running the hop vehicles, we need to have that out all the time, all the vehicles during that time. But during these gap hours, when it doesn't make sense, we are going to be contracting with Uber and Lyft and probably a company called UServe. You guys know how Uber and Lyft works. The rate that you would pay for one of our vehicles will still apply to an Uber vehicle. So if it's in a gap hour, let's say later in the evening kind of thing, but it's within the hours of our operation, but we don't have our vehicles out, you can still go to our app, order a vehicle. It just won't be one of our vehicles coming to get you during those gap hours. It would be an Uber or a Lyft, or if it's a handicapped individual, it would be a UServe vehicle. UServe is another, all of those, Uber, Lyft, UServe, and there's a whole bunch of others, taxis. We refer to those as TNCs, Transportation Network Companies. UServe is a TNC that actually has ADA certified vehicles. They have lifts and ramps on them, and their drivers are credentialed for ADA service as well. So I ran into them a year ago at a conference in Denver. Really liked them. Ran into them again last week. They did respond to our RFP, and they did get approved for services. So, and I told them last week we intend to use them in this region. They're not in this region at all, but they're excited about coming here as well. So there are other pieces to this, and you would still just pay the same rate that you would you would pay the same rate as if it were our vehicle. Now, Uber and Lyft, they'll charge whatever, $20, let's say. So, but it would still only cost you $2. And then Uber and Lyft will bill us at the end of the month, and we would pay them out of subsidy money from FTA. So it's really a win-win. All right, that's a lot of information. So we're excited. So far, what we're seeing, it's working, and we're excited about it. Thank you.
Daryl, I had just a quick question. So in terms of the training, to kind of expand on what you've been talking about, eventually when the system is running, will you have on your website all the kinds of information that people will need? So for example, if people want to find out how to get involved, how to get registered and things like that, but also what are the route areas and things like that, because there may be areas where people are living that are not part of it, but that are adjacent.
Yeah.
So they'll need to know that. Will that all be on your website, or
yeah.
will it be something in the app itself?
Yes, and that's part of the training. So that's a good point also. We do on the maps, and you'll see those on the website. We have a map has boundaries. So these zones all have boundaries. And so our vehicles are going to go in those zones and in the adjacent zones, and they will feed the connector like they're feeding the circulator on base. So, but what happens if somebody lives just right outside the zone? Well, it's a origin to destination, curb to curb type of service. If it's walkable for them, they can walk into the zone, and they can put in the app, pick me up at the 7-Eleven, at whatever corner, and we will pick them up wherever. But they do need to be in the zone. We're kind of getting into an area of future growth. We've got a budget we have to operate within. That money only buys so many vehicles, and those vehicles can only efficiently serve so much area. But I think what we will see, we hope, what the plan is that like this kind of in 10 days going from 7 passengers to 562, that's pretty steep. And that's still in the, what's called the initial phase of all of this. It's still a pilot to the pilot. So we're going to see significant growth in this. I think as you see significant growth, I think the cities would be willing and more open to providing more funding, which would allow us to provide more vehicles, which would allow us to expand the zones. And it's not just the cities. As things grow, FTA and TxDOT would also be putting in additional money as well. So Walter, you're kind of getting into a growth area here. Speaking of which, I want to get with you guys on parking over at A&M.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you afterwards.
We haven't forgot about
Okay.
all of that. I've talked to Jason about parking in Temple. I want to talk to you guys again about parking at A&M. And by the way, we're going to put A&M as one of those satellites as well as the airport in Killeen, similar to what we're doing with the senior home and the clinic in Temple. So there are certain areas that today might be outside of the main zones, but it just makes sense for us to serve. So we'll put those as independent satellites and serve them.
James?
Daryl, and I think we said this when we talked, when we met with Spare, but just to be clear, when we do get these, I'm out of zone edge pickups, meeting at 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to track those, so when you come to the city to ask for more money because we need to expand the area,
Yes.
we have the data to show, this is my house, pick me up in zone versus I'm coming to meet the bus with the van.
Right.
I think it's going to be important to be able to distinguish those two data sets.
Yeah, that is the beauty of having the heat maps. With all of those analytics fed into the heat map, and we'll be able to show you heat map by time of day, by geographic area. Look at the pickups along one of the indicators will be if a zone needs to be expanded to the north, for example, you'll see a brighter red on the north edge of that zone.
Right.
That's an indicator to us that, we've got a lot of people wanting to get in the system there. So we really, and we will do this as time goes on. We will expand it on our own without more vehicles. This is very fluid, so we can play with these boundaries to make it fit the heat maps as we go. Go ahead.
You and I can do this all day. So then the question becomes, to her point, if we're very fluidly expanding the zones, how do we communicate that to the public? Hey, you're in the club now. I guess you may not know the answer to that right off, but that's a question.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of my question is, how do you know even for now that you're in the zone? When you look at the maps, will they be detailed enough to say, my street is in the zone, or my street is just out, or my street is well out?
Right.
Or will they be like, you put in, I know for a lot of things, you put in your address and it says, this, you qualify or you don't qualify?
Right. It'll show up on your phone. So the zones are on the phone as well.
Okay.
You can go to our website and see it, or you can do it
itself.
on the phone. So I think the best way to answer that, Jason, is if we dynamically just expand a zone a little to the north because we're seeing really bright red along that edge of that zone, we would expand it. It would show up that way on their phone. So they would see, yesterday I wasn't in the zone, but today I am. I don't even have to walk to the 7-Eleven. So
I'm thinking that there may be some benefit to do an information push, to steal your term.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of waiting for them to look at the app, we've got city communications department, we can maybe, you can stand in front of the camera for channel 10 or something.
Yeah, gee, thanks.
We also have code red mass notification system where you can draw polygons in the areas, even if you're just extending that out a little bit, where it includes that population that are signed up, of course, but
sure.
That way you don't have to reach out to all of Temple entirely and bother them with information that's delayed. But it doesn't have to be an emergency notification, it's just a community notification.
Yes, you're right. And there is advertising that goes into all of it. I'm doing a podcast this afternoon out at Fort Cavazos. So there's podcasts, there's the web, there's, just announcements overall. People call in. We've got a customer service department. They get calls all the time. And as things change, they're really good about communicating that. We're working, Bell County, Judge Blackburn offered their public information officer, forget his name.
James Stafford, it's my husband.
Who?
James Stafford.
Oh, yes. In fact, I wrote his name down yesterday, sitting right over here. Anyway, so Judge Blackburn volunteered his services. I'm going to be calling him probably later today. So there are ways of advertising, and I'm not an advertising person, but we do have access to experts who can help with all of that. It's exciting stuff. We've been wanting to go this way for a lot of years. We proposed a lot of it and were told no years ago. And then we were, because it wasn't just leading edge, it was leading edge at the time. Our leadership at that time was a little more risk adverse, I think. So, but anyway, we're at that point now where we can do it. Well, and then COVID came along, specifically with the hospital. Baylor Scott and White. We had some great meetings with Baylor Scott and White. Yeah, I think you were in there right before the pandemic. And talk about going south, wiping out. So we had Judge Blackburn in those meetings, and we were making good progress with that. We need to resurrect that now that we actually have a solution. So that's coming.
One last question then if how our rural committees are coming in for medical care to Baylor Scott and White, and they need to go to a pharmacy, and would they transition to our microtransit system, or would they still, are going to keep that separate between, a rural patient coming into our area?
Yeah. That kind of gets a little bit more futuristic, but we are planning intercity bus services. So intercity meaning the towns that are outside of our current 5 cities that will connect in. So that is one solution. Another solution that we are exploring, particularly in the rural areas, clinics that are out in the rural areas, is a van pool system where maybe Hill Country will buy a vehicle and provide the fuel, and maybe a clinic would provide a driver, or a volunteer would drive the vehicle. So there's a lot of futuristic things that will be coming down the pike in the next 5 years for sure, but 2 to 5 years, you'll see a lot of those types of programs coming online as well, which will help with that. But
I may, if I'm living in outside, and La Paz is coming into to here for medical service, I will just stay on that one bus and then get picked up. But would they be able to use, if I have to go to another doctor, it'd still be the same rural component?
A lot of that's still being worked out. I think what you're going to see in May is the urban system kick off. The rural system, which will also be a microtransit system, will kick off at some point, probably towards the latter part of the year. I'm thinking probably in the fall. So it'll be a little later in coming, but the same system will become available in the regions as well, between the main towns, etc. Yes.
Thank you, Daryl. First of all, congratulations on securing 16 vehicles. That's really awesome. And I'm just curious, on the public meetings, you mentioned that they're going to start around March 11th. And since this pilot program is going to be in the Fort Cavazos area, will those public meetings be geared for that demographic, or are they going to be throughout the region?
No, the ones that start on March 11th are for the for the urban towns, the 5 towns. They'll be, I'm not sure where they will be held, but they will be in the towns themselves. And the vehicles, you wouldn't believe, I may have mentioned this before, but not to RTAG, but in other settings. We actually had vehicles, we were leasing vehicles through Enterprise, and they were Ford Transits, and they got recalled. There were like 48,000 Ford Transits that got recalled due to safety reasons. Well, our 16 for Fort Cavazos were in that list, and so they went away. So we had to scramble, and we actually found these ProMasters, which are exactly the same kind of vehicle. They're head-to-head competitor vehicles. So we were very fortunate to find those. I literally my wife was driving, I was in the passenger seat reading, going to Dallas, and we went past Carpenter Bus on 35, and I just happened to put my reading material down and look out the window, and I saw a bunch of white vehicles sitting on their lot. So I called them and said, hey, I saw some vehicles on your lot. Are those for sale by chance? And they said, yes. So I went there the next Monday. Visited with them. So we're fortunate.
Yeah, I just have 2 more thoughts. When y'all start connecting with the community resources, Tara, I would like to encourage y'all to include public library staff members in that.
Okay.
I think our public libraries are a great resource for the demographics that are going to be using our transit. And then also, do y'all have a call center in place for individuals that are calling in that won't have access to the app? I can imagine that the wait times might pile up, and that might be another area that.
Yeah, there is a call center. We have our own, and then we also have it set up so that any overflow would be answered in Vancouver at spare. So you may get somebody in Belton, or you might get somebody in Vancouver, Canada that you're talking to. But either way, they have the same access to the same information. Yeah, little different accent. Hey?
Hey. Thank you.
All right, good discussion.
Thank you.
Sorry so long, but it is a lot of material.
Okay, we will move on to item number 8 regarding the quarterly report.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's still me.
That's just your summary.
Yeah, I'm not going to take a lot of time on this. This is just our quarterly report, and I just, because I was out of town, I just emailed it to Dominic yesterday, I think. Late
last 5 p.m.
So anyway, I do have a copy here. I will just touch on the executive summary. It really just has to do with numbers. The numbers, we've met all the goals with the exception of fixed route ridership. Our goal is 10 passengers per service hour. It is, I think I've told you before, it's climbing back up since COVID. It is up to 9.1 passengers per service hour now. So we're getting close to meeting that goal again. And I can put a green check mark by it. But it's still not as good as it was pre-COVID. We were actually bouncing around 13 passengers per service hour pre-COVID. But that's one that we still have not bounced all the way back from. And the other one is our road calls. We are not meeting that goal. Our goal there is to only have 10 or less road calls per 100,000 miles. A road call is when we have to send a mechanic out to a vehicle or tow the vehicle in. Our goal is 10. The actual during this last quarter was 12.16 road calls per 100,000 miles. That is a direct, only a direct correlation to the age of our vehicles. That's been down all the way through COVID, or I should say that number has been up all the way through COVID because we are not auctioning off our vehicles. We're keeping them for parts. So we will have a auction. I hope to have it before May. So I hate to do one more thing before this kickoff, but we also have an FTA audit coming up, so I need to get rid of some vehicles because our spare ratio is through the roof. So they monitor us on all that.
Right.
We can move on to agenda item 9, discussion of any new unmet transportation needs for special populations.
Yep, so it's just our usual agenda item at the end here. So if you have any unmet needs, gaps, and deficiencies, or anything new for the populations we serve, low income, disabilities, unemployed, 65 and older, children, veterans, you can bring that up here, or you can email me later.
I'd like to, before we leave, just recognize Felicia Holland. And she's with Habitat for Humanity and for Habitat for Humanity. And what's interesting, we developed a relationship. As you well know, that we provide some ramps and grab bars for individuals with disabilities. And if you talk about transportation, Daryl, one of the biggest barriers is how do you get safely out of your home into your vehicles. And now with microtransit, there's a door-to-door pickup, but our relationship with them is great. But also, she has a personal situation where you've moved here and you've had as an end user of transit systems.
Yes, my daughter with disability, so it's like, if you don't have a vehicle, we have a lot of people that cannot get around, so there's an issue trying to get back and forth to the doctor's appointments, and things like that, so this is wonderful. I'm excited about it, and so you see a lot of people trying to get around with wheelchairs, no sidewalk, that's another thing, and ramps and things, so people really are at a disadvantage of transportation, trying to get to appointments and around town.
Something I saw last week that I really liked, this company User that I mentioned, they always give away trinkets. All of them do, pins and everything. Well, they were giving away some pins that you put on your jacket or just different things. But they had this little slogan going that ADA is a promise. It was what the pin said and all their material said. And they were one of the keynote speakers. And it was really refreshing to hear that view. I mean, they built a whole company with vehicles around just serving ADA, the ADA population, if you will. It really, I love that slogan, ADA is a promise. And it is a promise that we will provide service and we do our best at it. We can do better.
With that being said, I just want to add one more thing. Also, some of the individuals that go with the transportation have caregivers that go along with them. So
Yes.
do you have that component added into your transportation
Absolutely.
plan? Okay, great.
Yeah. They're allowed one caregiver, and then also, if they have children or whatever, they're allowed a companion. So a caregiver and a companion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't have anything else, then we'll go on to number 10, member updates.
Yep. Any other?
Okay. Final comments?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next meeting is set for Thursday, May 16th at 9:30 here. And then we will adjourn.
So let's just see what the initial
You
numbers
just
are,
adjourned.
day
Okay,
one
adjourned.
to the 16th.
We can adjourn.
It'll be interesting.